Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on the 5 steps to U.S. study undergraduate admissions. My name's Jenica Heim, and I am the Education USA advisor for Eastern Canada. Education USA is funded by the U.S. State Department. We are a network of more than 400 international student advising centers around the world. And we, as part of the U.S. State Department, you can take a look at our website at educationusa.state.gov to learn more about all of our centers around the world. We help students with free advising services, including accurate, comprehensive, and current information about accredited post-secondary institutions in the United States. We have 2 advisors in Canada, and I'm your advisor. You have my email address here. So again, my name's Jenica Heim, and it's at ottawa@educationusa.org. I help students all across Ontario, Quebec, and the Atlantic provinces. And if you have any questions about US study, you can always send me an email, but I do recommend checking out our resources first. You can go to educationusacanada.ca. We have a lot of great information there, and you can give updates on social, you can check out our updates on social media. Instagram is where we're really active. And in particular, in 2 weeks, it'll be International Education Week. On that week, we will be highlighting a lot of different students who are studying in the United States. And that's always a great week to check out all of our offerings. Today's presentation is called 5 Steps to U.S. Study. This is basically our overview on what you need to do to prepare to study in the U.S. and complete your application, and then eventually prepare to depart. So this particular presentation today will really focus on steps 1, 2, and 3. Step 1, research your options. So when looking to study in the United States, one thing that's very exciting is the number of options. There's more than 4,700 options, colleges and universities in the United States. And because of how many are available, the variety is great. There's a lot of different types of institutions. So we have both public and private institutions. There are liberal arts colleges, which are smaller institutions that are more focused on undergraduate studies. There are arts and tech institutes, which are more focused on hands-on and professional studies in art and technology. There are research universities of all sizes, including very large public institutions or highly selective private schools. And then, of course, there are 2-year community colleges, which are a bit different from what we have here in Ontario. Community colleges are built for transfer. They also have vocational programs. So you can do 2 years, an associate degree, and go right into the workforce, or you can complete 2 years for transfer, and then you go into a university and complete your studies just 2 more years, and you still get a bachelor degree in 4 years. Community colleges are a great way to save money, and they're also, if maybe you're in grade 12 right now and you don't know what you want to do, and maybe you took college courses, but now you want to go to university, or you need a little bit of a reset. Community college is a great way to do that. You can enroll in a college anywhere in the United States and prepare yourself to then improve your grades and get yourself ready for competitive university admissions. Students often look to the United States because there's so many options. It means there's so many more opportunities for different specializations, and the opportunity to do things like double major or minor. And also the campus life is very vibrant and can be quite attractive to students. So as you're narrowing your search, if you're in grade 9 through 11, you have plenty of time to start thinking about your priorities for these various things. Hopefully in grade 12, you've already started reflecting on these different factors. And if you haven't, now is the time to start doing so. So first of all, you need to reflect on your academic profile. having a good understanding of your grades and potentially your test scores and where you place in competitiveness at different universities will help with creating a list. And that's one way that Education USA can support is really letting you know what could be a good target school for you. Take into consideration not just the major, but the way you'll study. I mentioned that tech institutes are more hands-on. Liberal arts colleges take more of a breadth approach where you have to take a lot of courses outside of maybe your area of expertise, which can be really exciting for many people. Consider the location, the size of campus, the type of institution, and whether or not you need financial aid. That's important to factor into your search process. And lastly, any sort of campus life or nearby activities. For example, if you want to maintain a certain sport or you want to get involved in a club that you're currently involved in, like Model UN, that is something you can continue doing in your university studies. And so as someone just asked, what exactly is a research university? Good question. So, a lot of universities have professors who do research, but a research university in particular is one that typically has a lot of PhD and professional programs. So the professors themselves are highly dedicated to research. So most of the large flagship institutions in the United States, public flagship institutions, are some of the top research universities. There's actually something called the Carnegie Scale that tells you the rating, a research rating of every university in the US. So the highest rating is R1. So you mentioned Penn State. Penn State is absolutely an R1 research institution, as are some of the private schools that you might be familiar with, schools like Duke or Harvard. These are all going to be R1 research universities. So if you're interested in like a school that has a very high research caliber, you can take a look at the Carnegie Scale to see which ones are R1 schools. When you're narrowing your search, you can determine your must-haves and your wants. So not every single thing is going to be a must-have. So as you're kind of building your dream profile, really try to consider, is location critical for you? Are you open to go anywhere? Is your major, set in something you really want to study? Or are you undecided and are a little more flexible and you'll use your first year or two to really decide what you want to do? The best resource to search institutions is called the Big Future Search Engine, and it's part of the College Board. The College Board also does the SAT. So you might have heard of it. I highly recommend using it to narrow your search. It is not an ad-driven search engine, so it is going to be really good at pulling good fit options. Make sure you work with your guidance counselor from the very beginning because they are critical in helping you with the process. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. And of course, work with me. So if you need help narrowing your search, I can help you maybe pick out some good fit schools. And then as you're researching, make sure you always go to the websites of the specific universities you're interested in order to see exactly what their admissions processes are, what majors they have available, just really getting all the official information from the school. Make sure you're not getting that from blogs or third-party websites. I also recommend, if you're a social media user, following any institution that you're interested in just to learn a little more about the daily life from students or any kind of the sorts of activities that happen on campus. It's a bit more of an on-the-ground view. And more critically, make sure when you're on the website of the school, sign up for their prospective student lists. So basically, there'll be a little box or something that says, want more information? Click on that, provide your email, and maybe even your physical address because they might send you a packet in the mail, which is pretty cool. And then they'll let you know if the university comes and visits your area. You might be able to meet an admissions officer in person, or at the very least, join one of their webinars to learn more about their school. And then throughout the process, they'll keep you updated on admissions. In particular, we're going to talk a little bit about SAT and ACT. Some schools are test optional, but are maybe bringing their testing back. If you're a grade 11 student, sign up for every school you're interested in, because then they're going to email you and let you know if they've decided to make the SAT or ACT required again. So you definitely want to be on those lists so that you have the up-to-date information as quickly as possible. Also, some smaller institutions in the US use what's called demonstrated interest. So they are actually tracking how many students are interested in their institutions. So students often ask, what is a good number of schools to apply to? About 8 to 10 is a good number to narrow things down to. And most of those schools you want to be target schools. A target school matches your academic profile. And also, as far as admission statistics are concerned, the target is a really good image, because maybe those with more difficult to get into, but are still within your academic profile, are going to be kind of on the outer rings of the target, whereas those with maybe a more favorable admissions statistic would be more of a bullseye. And so most of the schools you apply to, you want to fit into that target zone, whereas, fewer schools should be in your reach area. Reach are going to be just outside of, sometimes called dream schools, just outside of your academic profile, or schools that are so highly selective, it's like very, very challenging to get in. And then lastly, you always want at least one school that's a sure bet. As I discussed in the United States, community colleges are a great sure bet option, particularly if you want to go down to the States right away. That's something that you can take into consideration. Although finance your studies is called step 2, I usually call it step 1.5. And that's because, if you'll remember from a couple slides ago, basically, if you're thinking about studying in the United States and you need some sort of financial aid, you need to make sure that that the school itself is providing some sort of scholarships, because that is the number one place that international students will receive any financial aid. And just know that the word financial aid in the US is any money you get, whether that's whether that's a scholarship, a grant, a loan. So and loans, usually as an international student, you won't be eligible for. So let's talk about the scholarships then. The different types, there's basically 4 different types of scholarships or aid that you might receive. Some schools have all of these, some have none of them. So this is why it's very important that in the search process, you understand what's going to be available at the schools you're interested in. Merit scholarships are based on grades, test scores, and or holistic application review. So the better your grades are, the more opportunities you have for some sort of scholarshiping. There is up to full scholarships, merit scholarships available at US universities, but of course, not all of them have that, and some don't have any at all, right? So you'll find it's incredibly variable on what those are looking like for international students. Needs-based grants are based on your family's income and other financial measures. There are a number of schools in the United States that meet full demonstrated need. So that means when a school assesses your family's income and like you mentioned, they have a whole form that has all sorts of financial information that you give. And basically the school will charge you what they believe you can afford. All 8 Ivy League universities, MIT, Stanford, and a bunch of other very highly selective private schools meet full demonstrated need. So that's basically charging what they believe your family can afford. Now, what do these schools have in common? You probably have already guessed. They're very, very difficult to get into. And so in order to get full need, you also need to be a highly meritorious student. You need to be accepted to a school like Harvard or University of Pennsylvania. And then from there, they will assess your need and charge you what they believe your family can afford. So what it means is that these institutions can be very, very generous based on your family situation. If you are receiving a full needs-based aid package, usually work study is part of that. Work study is kind of what it sounds like. You will work a bit, and that will go towards your financing. Athletic scholarships. I'm going to talk a little bit more about eligibility for athletic scholarships in a future slide, but basically if you are a highly competitive athlete, you need to be recruited by a coach in order to receive any athletic scholarship. Applying to a university, the admissions people are not assessing you for athletic aid at all. So that recruitment process needs to start as early as grade 10 in order to be recruited by a coach and potentially offered a scholarship. Performing and fine arts scholarships. So if you are in the performing arts, music, dance, theater, or the fine arts, there are many schools that have scholarships for these for being an artist and for pursuing that as your degree. On top of the university financial aid, you can also apply for OSAP. So you can apply through the provincial system to receive maybe some loans and scholarships. Just note that that usually doesn't cover the cost of education to study in the United States. So this is a good supplemental after you've received financial aid from the university itself. And then, of course, if you're looking to continue to access funds to help study and you need potentially some loans, you would need to, if you don't have US citizenship or permanent residency, you need to take out those banking loans within Canada or outside the country. You can only take out loans in the United States if you have an American co-signer. So usually students looking for loans would do so through maybe OSAP or through a Canadian bank. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the topic, completing your application. This first slide will review the application requirements you can expect at every US university. And then the next slide, we're going to speak a little bit more about what the holistic process is and some of the additional requirements that you might encounter. So every university will require you to pay an application or complete an application and pay a fee. The most commonly used application is actually called the Common App. So you're most likely that you're going to fill that out. However, it has about 1,000 partner schools, but there's more than 4,700 colleges and universities. So you'll find that you might fill out multiple applications during the process. For example, University of California, MIT, Georgetown, many of the schools in Texas, they all have their own application systems. You can expect to pay about 30 to 100 US dollars per school that you apply to. When you apply in the United States, you just apply once to the university and then you rank the majors you're interested in. And if you want a double major, that's something that you'll declare once you go to the school. So you don't pay multiple fees to apply to one university. And there are some schools that are free to apply to. So that's something that you can also look into. And then there's also something called a fee waiver. So if you are a low income student, you can request to have the fee to apply. You can request for it to be waived for you. And that is applicable to international students as well. When you apply, you need your official transcripts from all of high school. So that's grade 9 up until the time you apply during grade 12. Because you apply partway through grade 12, really they're looking majority at your grade 9 through 11 grades and maybe the first semester of grade 12. All of your documentation needs to be in English. So if you've gone to any French language or if you're an international student and you've previously gone to a school where the language is not English, you'll need an accompanied English translation with those transcripts. And this is where your guidance counselor comes into play. So your guidance counselor is responsible for uploading those transcripts into any application system that you are using. They also are going to provide a school report on your behalf, which is just information about the school you go to. And they're going to provide document updates throughout the process. So it's really important to get your guidance counselor involved early because they do need to be doing this. Sometimes deadlines can be as early as November, so they need to be supporting you throughout the year, and it's usually a bit earlier than the Ontario process. Standardized tests. So every university will have a policy regarding standardized tests. And you'll find that since COVID-19, a lot of schools have gone test optional, meaning that you don't have to submit an SAT or ACT score in order to apply. About 2/3 of schools are still test optional. However, many of them had policies to remain test optional up until 2025. Guess what? We're 2 months away from 2025. And so what that means is you might start seeing, like I mentioned, schools that are starting to announce bringing the scores back. Johns Hopkins about a month ago recently said for our applicants next year who are applying in 2025 to enroll in 2026, they will be required to submit an SAT or ACT. You don't have to take both tests. You can take either or, and they test English grammar, reading comprehension, and math up to grade 11. Basically, if you've taken functions, you have the level of math required. And then the ACT, the biggest difference is the ACT has a science section. So those are your two options. If you live in the Ottawa area, there aren't any ACTs in Ottawa, there's just SATs. But if you live in Toronto, there's plenty of options for both SAT or ACT. Kids in Ottawa, if you want to take ACT, oftentimes you just drive over the border to Ogdensburg is the closest test available. If you're a non-native English speaker and you've been learning in English for only a year or two, you might need to submit a English language proficiency test. The three options, most common options are TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo. Duolingo is the least expensive option and it's the easiest to access, but there are some universities that don't accept that test. So just be aware of that as you make your choices. As we move into this second slide, as I previously mentioned, this is about the holistic review. So basically, many institutions in the United States, they don't want to just look at your scores. They want to know more about who you are as a person. So the holistic review process will include, at the basic level, reviewing your activities list that you'll provide, which is a staple of the Common Application. It's where you include everything that you're involved in extracurricularly, also work, volunteerism, family responsibilities, essentially anything that's not schoolwork. And this is an opportunity to give a little more information about who you are and how you balance your time outside of schoolwork. On top of that, you might be required or allowed to submit some of these following things. Recommendation letters. Some schools don't need them, some will just need one, or some might require up to 3. It's common to need a letter from your guidance counselor, either 1 or 2 of your core teachers, and you might even be allowed to submit additional letters from electives teachers, coaches, supervisors, religious leaders, essentially anyone that you work with in the community who can say really nice things about you. So it's usually somebody who's in some sort of mentorship or supervisory role. Some schools even want you to submit a peer letter. I know that's part of the Dartmouth process. Essays and writing supplements. It's really common to submit a personal essay up to 650 words. This is an essay that's about you. Who are you? What are you going to contribute to the campus environment, through your personality, your character traits, things like that. And then some universities will have specific supplements. Why do you want to go to this school? Why do you want to study this major? Things that are more specific to that institution. The more selective the institution is that you apply to, the more likely that you'll have many university supplements, recommendation letters, and possibly other things that are required of you, such as an interview or a graded paper. In the case of Rice University here, they have something called the Box Project, where they ask students to upload a photo that's meaningful to them. So these supplements range in and what they want students to do. More and more, we're seeing videos where they want students to spend about 2 minutes introducing themselves. That's something that Brown requires. And they might allow you to include portfolios. So that could be a STEM portfolio, a maker, like a maker profile, a research abstract, or even an arts portfolio, even if you're not applying to arts, that can be assessed as part of your application. So for those of you who are in grade 9 through 11, what can you be doing right now? Set yourself up for success as far as your coursework is concerned. US universities are looking at your entire 9 through 12 or whenever you apply in grade 12 in order to get a sense of the strength of your studies, what courses you've chosen throughout high school, what you've excelled in. So early on, you can start doing the building block courses that will put you towards those more highly difficult classes in 11 and 12. And it's never too early to start exploring post-secondary options that could be a good fit. In grade 11, you can take an SAT or ACT. As I mentioned, the tests are set up for your grade level at that time. So if you're here and in grade 11, really think about signing up for the spring. And start taking on leadership roles, independent projects, academic competitions, community service. This says and or because you're not expected to do all of these things. It's really about what is interesting and exciting to you and where are you going to excel. And so just really pushing yourself in your extracurriculars into the spaces where you can show that show excellence in that area or show leadership or show your commitment to your community. Make sure you're taking challenging but achievable coursework and start attending college fairs, going on campus tours, and joining virtual info sessions to really help you start to narrow your options. Because there's so many options in the United States, really starting that process in grade 11 can help you feel prepared going into grade 12. Your application timeline in grade 12 starts in the summer before grade 12. Applications open as early as August, and it's a great idea to start working on those essays before school starts because some universities have deadlines as early as November 1st, or at least if you're looking at early deadlines, you might plan for November 1st. Some schools have what's called early decision or early applications, so early action. So you might consider that. It's not required and not all schools have these early deadlines. Basically, early action means you just hear back from the school by mid-December. You can still apply to other schools. Whereas early decision, it's a binding choice. So if you get into that school, it means that that's the school you'll be attending. So early decision is not for everybody, but it's a potentially good option if you have a really clear top choice school. And regular deadlines run anywhere from November to around February, although some are later and have rolling deadlines all the way through the year. Decisions are released at the end of March, beginning of April, and then as much as things differ across US universities, May 1st is the decision day. So that's where everybody needs to get their deposits in. So I know that's a little different than the timeline here in Ontario, and it's actually slightly earlier than when some schools get things together. As promised, here's a little bit of information for athletes. So if you are if you want to play your sport when you go off to university, there are a lot of different ways to do that. You could do that as a scholarship athlete or just a little more for fun and less intensive and without a scholarship. So if you are an elite athlete and looking to get a scholarship, the National Collegiate Athletic Association or the NCAA Divisions 1 and 2 have athletic scholarships. Division 3 does not. There's also a smaller division called NAIA that has scholarships. And the NJCAA is the community college division that also has scholarships. So that's a way to go to a two-year college and still receive scholarships. As far as not other opportunities without scholarships, there are things like club sports. So there's a lot of opportunities to keep playing your sport at a really high level, and even have national level competitions, even if it's not a scholarship sport. So sports like cycling, rugby, triathlon, or even there's an entire hockey division called Acha hockey, where you can get involved at a very high level in your sport, and but it's not the same as being a scholarship athlete. So if you'd like to be considered for athletic scholarships, as I mentioned, you need to reach out to coaches as early as grade 10. You can register for the eligibility center as soon as you'd like. You can even get a free account right away, but if you know you want to be recruited to the States, you might consider paying for an account so that you can start taking advantage of the resources that they have there, and get an NCAA ID number. The most important thing is that academically you complete what's called your 16 core courses. This is an English class every year, which is what you need to do to graduate high school in Ontario. So some of these requirements are going to be really similar to what you're already doing. But the most important thing is they have to be academic level classes. So all the de-streamed grade 9 classes count, but in grade 10, if you're taking any applied coursework, and then going on and taking college coursework, unfortunately, you will not be eligible to compete in the NCAA, and you might consider going to a community college first. So that's 4 English, 3 math, 2 sciences, 1 additional math, English, or science, 2 social science classes, which are history, geography, psychology, anthropology, law, for example, and then 4 more classes that fit in the core courses, as well as, they call it foreign language, but basically second language. So if you take French classes, those can fit in this final category. You need at least a 2.3 out of 4.0. The way that the grade average works is 80 to 100 is an A, or a 4.0. So if you have an 81% in 80 or more in all of your classes, you have a 4.0 GPA for the NCAA. 70 to 79 is a B, or a 3.0, and 68 to 69 is a C or a 2.0. So you can see in order to get a 2.3 average, you need to have, some of your classes, at least if you're getting a lot of 60s, you need at least some of your classes in the 70s in order to hit that 2.3. If you're well over and above that, then you should be well on your way to being accepted to be able to play in the NCAA. Besides reaching out to coaches to be recruited, maintaining your academic average, you also need to maintain amateur status, which means not becoming a professional athlete. We're going to fly through the last 2 steps. If you are a Canadian citizen, you do not need to apply for a visa to study in the United States. So actually, once you are accepted, and you get the I-20 from your school, all you need is your I-20 and your Canadian passport when you cross the border. If you are not a Canadian citizen, you will apply for a visa. There are 7 consulates across Canada, and in Ontario, there's one in Ottawa and one in Toronto. And so you would need to sign up for an appointment there to get your visa. And Education USA is with you every step of the way. We do a pre-departure every June where we help students learn more about the paperwork they need to prepare to cross the border and getting ready to go to your campus. So if you want to check that out, we put it on our YouTube channel. So just as a reminder, here's some of the contact information. And I'm happy to jump in and start answering some questions. I see we have a lot of questions that have come through. So I will do my best to get to as many as I can. You can see that my colleague Faduma is also putting some resources in the chat. So please feel free to follow us on Instagram, check out our website, and then we have some really great documents. Our 5 steps to US study, how to finance your studies. And they're not just on our website, they're also going to be, I'm here all day in the launch. So you can, if I don't answer your Q&A right now, make sure to ask it to me in the VFair session. And we also have links to a lot of our stuff in the booth. So please feel free to join me over there. Can someone in Canada who does not have permanent residency study in the United States? Absolutely. You too would be an international student in the United States just as a Canadian. Just because we're here in Canada, I'm speaking more to students who have Canadian citizenship or residency, but you also can reach out to Education USA and ask your questions. And you also can reach out to your advisor in your home country if you have more questions about, say, financing or scholarships based on your citizenship. So that's where the Education USA network really comes in handy. Do Canadian grades transfer to the American system when applying? So this is a good question. So basically, when you're applying, you will submit your transcript, and either the university on the other side will either look at it in context, so they'll look at it within the Ontario grading system, how you're doing on the 100-point scale. We don't have GPAs here, so they'll just look at how your grades exist as they are. Now, some schools will need a GPA. How do they get that? Well, they're not going to ask you to create your own GPA. Unfortunately, you're not a reliable resource, but rather what they do is they will either make the GPA themselves, in which case they might use a similar scale to the one I just mentioned, 80 to 100 being a 4.0, but they might create some variation in that scale. So something like a 83 might be an A- and be a 3.7 as opposed to a 4.0. So every school might be a little different on how they create that GPA. The third option is you might need to pay a resource called a evaluator. You might need to pay an evaluator to create a GPA out of 4.0 for you. Now, if you do that, just know that not every school needs that. So that's probably something you want to wait to see what your school list is. And then if you need an evaluation, you would have to pay the fees in order to do that. Someone asked, when should I take the SAT exam? Ideally, taking it in grade 11 is a great idea because you can take it more than once. And so if you're not happy with your score, you have plenty of time to take it again. The SAT is offered 7 times per year. And so the next option is the beginning of December. And then after that, in the spring, there's the first Saturday in March, the first Saturday in May, and the first Saturday in June. So if you're a grade 11 student, there's only 4 more SATs coming up in this given year. So it's a great idea to sign up for one of them at least. And then if you're not happy with your score and you're looking into the fall of your grade 12 year, there's the Saturday, the end of August, the beginning of October, the beginning of November, and then of course back to the beginning of December again. And so as you can see in the fall, while there are options almost every month, if you wait till October to take your first test and you want to test again, you start running a little low on time, particularly if you have any deadlines in November. Are Canadian students treated as international students or local students? You are an international student. If you have American citizenship, you would be considered a domestic student who studies abroad or lives abroad. American students have many more options when it comes to financing your studies. You can apply for financial aid in the United States. It's called the FAFSA. So that's the American government aid system. You also might be considered for more financial aid depending on the university. So yeah, you are an international student as a Canadian. There are some schools that have some specific discounts or lower tuitions for Canadian students, such as Maine. So if you want to know more about that, check out our financial aid resource document, which Faduma's added a link there to our resources page. What would you say is a competitive SAT score? Yeah, so every school is really different on what is a competitive SAT score. So the SAT is out of 1,600. No, there's not 1,600 questions. It is a scaled test. Anything above, so some students think, oh, I need to get 1,600 in order to be competitive. No, it's very, very difficult to get a perfect score, and very few students get perfect scores. Typically anything around 1,400 let's say 1450 and above is a like 99 percentile. Usually around 90% and above is somewhere around 1350. So I think, students think, oh no, I got a 1350, I didn't get a good score. 1350 is a really good score depending on what schools you're applying to, right? There's many schools where that's a great target score and could even be enough to get you the highest level scholarships available at that school. So it's not so much what type of degree that you're applying to, it's more about what's the range, the typical range of the university where you're considering. And usually taking an SAT in grade 11 can also help you decide on what your academic profile is and which schools are a best match. So if you're like, oh, I've always wanted to go to this highly selective Ivy League school all my life, and you're scoring 1200 on the SAT, you might want to recalibrate a little bit and think, okay, well, what are some of the schools that are like more in my range of where I'm scoring right now? So some students are asking about what do Ivy Leagues require academically? So in the United States, there's no like specific courses you're required to take. It's more about the breadth of coursework that you take. So much like you have the 16 core courses for the NCAA, most universities are looking that you've taken English every year, math every year. The more selective universities want to see that maybe you've been in at least 3 science classes. If you're pursuing science, more at least 4 science classes, social science, at least 3 years. So they're really looking that you've stayed in core academic coursework for extended periods of time. And then they're really looking at how did you push yourself in your coursework. So if you have AP or IB available to you, did you take those? And if you did, how did you do in those classes? If you didn't have those available to you, how did you supplement that with maybe more highly academic extracurriculars or research projects you initiated on your own? So if you're hoping to be considered for some of these more selective US universities, it's not just about what classes you take, it's also just like, how are you performing in those classes? But also there's no cutoff. It's not like, oh, you need 99% in everything. You could be a 93% average student, but if you're like, have these really amazing extracurriculars that just kind of knock the socks off of the admissions committee, then those also matter. So that holistic part is super important. It's really about where you've challenged yourself and how you've excelled. The students I've seen who've been competitive for Ivy League schools are not just stellar students and usually one of the best students in their graduating class. They're also something else pretty special, like whether that's being highly involved in their community, whether that's being somebody who's going to international level competitions for their club they're involved in, whatever that thing is, there's usually something that really sparkles about that student. So when students say, well, what can I do in grade 9 or 10 to like become that person? It's really hard to give that advice because there's a lot of self-motivation you need to be not just successful academically, but to find another area of passion where you also want to be successful. Now, there are many of great schools in the United States besides the Ivy League, and that's where I come in. I'm so happy to help you pick out other great institutions that you could be a really good fit for. So do feel free to stay in touch, educationusacanada.ca. Go ahead and visit me in the booth. There's 125 unanswered questions here, so please ask them to me in the booth space, and I'm happy to answer every single one of them. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great time at the launch fair, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully at other Education USA activities in the future. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Jenica. And just a reminder, just like Jenica said, please visit the booths in the VFairs website. You can connect with Jenica there. And there are also many booths of other topics that might be of interest to you. Enjoy the break. Enjoy the rest of the day, folks. Take care.